Welcome to God is with, where we explore stories of faith, hope, and the enduring presence of divine love. Today, we invite you into the quiet solitude of a dusty workshop, home to Elias, a craftsman adrift in the shadows of profound loss. His world, once vibrant with joy and creativity, has been hollowed by grief, his belief shaken by a silence that seems to mock his prayers. Join us as we follow Elias's journey out of this darkness. This is a story about the tender, often unseen, ways God's love reaches into a broken life, offering not simplistic solutions, but a path toward a deep, humanistic salvation. We'll witness how gentle whispers of grace, the unexpected warmth of human connection, and the steadfast assurance of divine protection can mend a fractured spirit. It's a testament to finding hope, purpose, and an unshakable love, not by avoiding life's storms, but by discovering an anchor within them. See how even the deepest wounds can transform into sources of compassion, reflecting a love that never truly lets us go. If Elias's story resonates with you and you feel the message shared on the God is With channel could bring comfort or inspiration to others, please show your support by liking and sharing this video. Now, let us begin Elias's story. The old workshop was quiet, save for the rhythmic rasp of Elias's plane against a stubborn piece of oak. Dust motes danced in the few shafts of afternoon sun that pierced the grimy windows, each a tiny galaxy in the dim expanse of his solitude. It had been years since laughter echoed in this space, years since a customer's eager anticipation filled the air. Now it was just Elias, the scent of wood shavings, and the heavy cloak of memories that threatened to suffocate him. His wife, Sarah, had been the light of this place, her gentle hum a constant melody to his woodworking. Her loss had not just emptied their home. It had hollowed out his soul, leaving a void that no amount of work could fill. He paused, wiping a weary hand across his brow. The wood, usually a pliant friend under his touch, felt resistant today, much like his own heart. He had prayed. Oh, how he had prayed in those raw, early days of grief. He had called out to a God he had always believed was there, a benevolent overseer Sarah had spoken of with such unwavering faith. But his cries had seemed to echo back unanswered from a silent heaven. The loving Father she described felt distant, an abstract concept rather than a comforting presence. Where was the protection then? Where was the love when the darkness had swallowed his world whole? Elias picked up a half-finished carving of a dove, its wings outstretched. It was meant for the new church down the street, a peace offering he wasn't sure he felt. He ran a callous thumb over the smooth curve of a wing. Sarah had loved doves. She said they were messengers of hope. He saw only fragile creatures, easily broken. His gaze drifted to a small, tarnished silver locket lying on his workbench, Sarah's. He hadn't been able to bring himself to put it away. Inside, he knew, was a miniature portrait of them, younger, their faces bright with a future that had been stolen. He reached for it, then pulled his hand back as if burned. The pain was still a living thing, a sharp shard in his chest. Why? He whispered to the empty workshop, the question that had haunted his waking hours and shadowed his dreams for 3 long years. If you are love, why such pain? If you are a protector, why was she taken? The only answer was the continued rasp of his own labored breathing and the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner. Each tick a reminder of time passing, of life moving on without her, without him, it felt. He had become a ghost in his own life, his hands moving, shaping wood, but his spirit adrift. He often felt a profound weariness, not just of the body, but of the soul, a sense of being utterly and irrevocably alone in a vast, indifferent universe. The concept of salvation, of being rescued from this despair, felt like a child's fairy tale. Yet, sometimes in the quietest moments, when the ache was a dull throb rather than a piercing stab, he would feel something. A fleeting warmth on his skin when there was no sun, a sudden, inexplicable scent of lilies, Sarah's favorite, when there were no flowers nearby. He dismissed these as tricks of a grieving mind, his subconscious clinging to phantoms. He had built walls around his heart, thick and high, to keep out further hurt, but also, unknowingly, to keep out the light that gently sought to enter. That evening, as dusk settled, casting long, melancholic shadows across the workshop floor, Elias found himself unable to work any longer. The dove lay unfinished, its wooden eyes seeming to reproach him. He cleaned his tools with mechanical precision, his movements slow, deliberate. He was about to lock up when he noticed a small, mud-stained child standing by the doorway, peering in with wide, hesitant eyes. The boy couldn't have been more than 6, his clothes ragged, his face smudged with dirt and tears. Elias, not usually one for children since Sarah. But something in the boy's frightened gaze tugged at a long dormant chord within him. "Hello there," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "Are you lost, son?" The boy nodded, a fresh wave of tears welling. I can't find my mama." Elias's first instinct was to direct him to the local constable, to pass the responsibility. He was not equipped for this. But then he saw the tremor in the child's small hands, the utter desolation in his eyes, and it mirrored something deep within himself. He sighed, the sound less weary this time, almost gentle. "Come in out of the cold. Let's see if we can't figure this out." He led the boy, whose name was Daniel, into the small kitchen at the back of the workshop. He found some leftover bread and a piece of cheese, warming a little milk on the old stove. As Daniel ate, hesitantly at first, then with a growing appetite, he recounted his story. A trip to the market, a moment of distraction, and then the terrifying realization of being alone. Elias listened, asking gentle questions, his heart, surprisingly, aching with a different kind of pain empathy. He saw not just a lost child, but a reflection of his own lostness. As he looked at Daniel, a strange feeling settled over him. It wasn't the sharp grief for Sarah, nor the dull ache of loneliness he'd grown accustomed to. It was a sense of purpose, however small, however temporary. This child needed him. "Your mama," Elias said softly. "She must be very worried. We'll find her." He heard the words leave his lips and was surprised by the conviction in them. For the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker not of despair, but of a quiet resolve. After Daniel had finished eating and his tears had subsided, Elias took his small hand. "Let's go look. Where did you last see her?" They stepped out into the twilight. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of rain. As they walked towards the market square, Daniel chattering now with a child's resilience, pointing out sights that had scared him moments before, Elias felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. It was as if the simple act of caring for this small, vulnerable life had chipped away at the ice around his own heart. They searched for an hour, the sky growing darker, the crowds thinning. Hope began to wane, and Daniel's small hand tightened in his. Elias felt a familiar pang of helplessness. What if they couldn't find her? What then? He looked down at the boy's anxious face, illuminated by the flickering gas lamps, and he knew he couldn't give up. He remembered Sarah's unwavering belief in prayer, not as a magical incantation, but as a conversation, a reaching out. Awkwardly, silently, as they walked, Elias found himself uttering a prayer, not of demand or anger, but a simple plea. "Please help us find his mother. Please guide us." It wasn't a bolt of lightning or a booming voice from the heavens that answered. Instead, as they turned a corner onto a quieter side street, he heard a woman's voice, frantic, calling a name. "Daniel! Daniel, where are you?" Daniel's head snapped up. "Mama!" he cried, pulling his hand free and darting towards the sound. A woman, her face streaked with tears, her shawl askew, rushed forward and enveloped the boy in a fierce hug, her sobs of relief echoing in the narrow street. Elias stood back, a lump in his throat, watching the raw, powerful love between mother and child. It was a scene of pure, unadulterated joy, a stark contrast to the desolation that had been his constant companion. The mother, after assuring herself Daniel was unharmed, looked up at Elias, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Oh, thank you. I was so afraid. I didn't know what to do." Elias merely nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his chest. He felt a not happiness, not yet, but a profound sense of rightness, a feeling that he had been exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was supposed to do. As he watched the mother cuddle her son, stroking his hair, murmuring words of love, he felt a warmth spread through him, a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature of the evening. Later, as he walked back to his empty workshop, the streets were quiet. The encounter had shaken him, not in a bad way, but in a way that made the world seem different, less gray. He hadn't performed a miracle. He had simply helped a lost child. Yet it felt significant, that silent, hesitant prayer. Had it been heard? Or was it coincidence? He reached his workshop, the scent of wood welcoming him like an old friend. He looked at the unfinished dove. Its wings, poised for flight, seemed to hold a different meaning now. Not just fragile, but perhaps also resilient, capable of soaring above the brokenness. He picked up the locket from the workbench, his fingers tracing its cool metal surface. He opened it. Their faces, Sarah's and his, smiled back at him from the past. The pain was still there, a deep, familiar ache, but it was softer somehow, less sharp. He thought of Daniel's small hand in his, the trust in the boy's eyes. He thought of the mother's overwhelming relief. And he thought of that quiet plea, sent out into the darkness. For a fleeting moment, he felt as though he hadn't been walking alone with Daniel. There had been an unseen presence, a gentle guidance leading them to that specific street, at that specific time. A protector, not in the sense of preventing all harm, but perhaps in guiding through it, in bringing solace and reunion. A love, not that erased pain, but that could bloom even in its shadow. He didn't have all the answers. The universe still felt vast and mysterious. But tonight, the silence of the workshop didn't feel quite as empty. Felt expectant, as if waiting for him to listen more closely, to look more deeply, not just with his eyes, but with a heart that was perhaps slowly, tentatively beginning to mend. He realized that the human capacity for compassion, for kindness, was in itself a form of salvation, a reflection of a greater love that wove through the fabric of existence. The salvation wasn't a grand escape from suffering, but finding meaning and connection within it. He sat down at his bench, not to work, but simply to be still. He looked around the familiar space, at the tools of his trade, at the wood waiting to be shaped. And for the first time in a very long time, Elias felt a fragile seed of hope taking root in the barren soil of his grief. It was a feeling so new, so delicate, he was almost afraid to acknowledge it, lest it wither. But it was there, a tiny spark in the overwhelming darkness, a promise whispered on the quiet evening air. Perhaps, he thought, Sarah's God, the loving, protective presence she spoke of, hadn't been silent after all. Perhaps he had been speaking in a language Elias was only now beginning to understand, the language of human connection, of quiet miracles in ordinary lives, of love that persisted beyond loss. He was not being asked to forget his sorrow, but to find a way to live with it, to let it coexist with a slowly reawakening capacity for joy and purpose. The path ahead was still shrouded in mist, but for the first time, a faint light seemed to beckon. The days that followed Daniel's reappearance were subtly different for Elias. The profound shift wasn't dramatic, no sudden epiphany that painted the world in vibrant new colors, but rather a gentle thawing, like the first days of spring after a long, hard winter. He found himself noticing small things again, the way the morning light slanted through the workshop window, the cheerful chirping of sparrows nesting in the eaves, the shy smile of the baker's daughter when he bought his daily bread. These were details that grief had previously obscured, rendered insignificant by the magnitude of his loss. He finished the dove for the church, and as he sanded its wings to a silken smoothness, he felt a quiet satisfaction. It was no longer just a task, a commission. It was an offering, a small piece of himself shaped by hands that were slowly relearning the language of hope. When he delivered it, the young pastor, Father Michael, a man with kind eyes and an understanding smile, didn't just offer payment. He invited Elias for tea. Hesitantly, Elias accepted. Their conversation was easy, flowing from woodworking to village news, and then gently to matters of the heart. Elias found himself speaking of Sarah, not with the raw anguish that had characterized his grief for so long, but with a tender reminiscence, sharing small, cherished memories. Father Michael listened patiently, offering not platitudes or easy answers, but a compassionate presence. "Grief is a heavy burden, Elias," Father Michael said softly, stirring his tea. "But love, the love you shared with Sarah, that doesn't die, transforms. And sometimes, God's comfort comes not in removing the burden, but in giving us the strength to carry it, and perhaps to find new meaning alongside it." Elias considered this strength. He had felt so weak for so long. But helping Daniel, connecting with Father Michael, these small acts had not demanded a strength he didn't possess, but rather seemed to awaken a dormant capacity within him. He spoke of his confusion, his feeling of abandonment by God. "Ah," Father Michael nodded. "The silence of God. It's a profound mystery, one that has troubled believers for centuries. We cry out in our pain, and sometimes the heavens seem made of brass. But I wonder, Elias, if sometimes God's voice isn't in the thunder, but in the whisper, in the kindness of a stranger, in the unexpected courage we find within ourselves, in the enduring beauty of the world He made, even when our own world is falling apart." A whisper. Elias thought of the fleeting scent of lilies, the inexplicable warmth. He thought of the sudden, clear impulse to take a specific route when searching for Daniel's mother. Were these the whispers? Had he been too deafened by his own sorrow to hear them? "He is a protector, Elias," Father Michael continued, his gaze earnest. "Perhaps not always in the ways we expect or demand. He doesn't promise a life free from storms, but He promises to be with us in the storm. His salvation isn't always a dramatic rescue from earthly suffering, but a deeper rescue of the soul, a drawing us towards love, towards compassion, towards Himself, even through our pain. Humanistic salvation. The phrase echoed in Elias's mind, taking on a new resonance. It wasn't about abstract doctrines, but about the tangible experience of love and grace working in and through human lives, restoring dignity, fostering connection, healing what was broken. He left the rectory that day with a sense of lightness, but also with many questions. The walls around his heart hadn't crumbled, but a few stones had been loosened, allowing a sliver of light to penetrate. He began to read the small Bible Sarah had kept on her bedside table, its pages worn, her faint pencil marks next to passages that had spoken to her. He read not with the expectation of instant answers, but with a hesitant curiosity, a desire to understand the faith that had sustained her so completely. He found passages that spoke of a God who was a shepherd, a father, a comforter. He read of a love that was patient and kind, that bore all things, believed all things, hoped all things, endured all things. He read of a divine presence that was not aloof or distant, but intimately involved in the lives of His creation, sharing in their joys and their sorrows. One afternoon, a young woman named Clara came to his workshop. Her cart had lost a wheel just outside, and she was distraught, her wares, beautiful, hand-painted pottery, at risk of being damaged. Elias, in the past, might have gruffly directed her to the blacksmith. But today, he saw her distress, the fear in her eyes, and something moved in him. He spent the next hour helping her, skillfully repairing the wheel, his hands steady and sure. Clara, overwhelmed with gratitude, insisted on gifting him a small, beautifully painted vase. "It's not much," she said, her smile radiant. "But please accept it as a token of my thanks. You saved my day." Elias looked at the vase, its surface adorned with delicate blue flowers. It reminded him of Sarah's eyes. He felt a pang, but it was mingled with a warmth. "It's beautiful, thank you," he said, and his smile, though rusty, was genuine. As Clara left, her cart rattling cheerfully away, Elias placed the vase on his workbench, next to Sarah's locket. It didn't replace what was lost, but it added something new, a testament to a small act of kindness, a connection forged. He realized that God's love wasn't just a feeling or an abstract concept. It was an action, an imperative to reach out, to serve, to connect. And in doing so, he was not just helping others, he was healing himself. He started attending the small village church, sitting quietly in the back pew. He didn't always understand the sermons, and sometimes his doubts would resurface with a vengeance. But he found a quiet comfort in the shared space, in the hymns that spoke of hope and redemption, in the sense of community. He saw other faces there, people he knew from the village, each carrying their own unseen burdens, their own quiet hopes. He was not alone in his struggles, nor, perhaps, in his tentative seeking. One day, Father Michael asked if Elias would consider teaching a small woodworking class for some of the village youth who had little to occupy their time. Elias was hesitant. He was a craftsman, not a teacher, and the thought of being surrounded by the boisterous energy of youngsters was daunting. But then he remembered Daniel, the way the boy's face had lit up when Elias had shown him how to hold a small piece of wood in the vise. I'll think about it," Elias had said. That night he dreamt of Sarah. She was in their garden, the one she had tended with such love, surrounded by blooming roses and lilies. She turned to him, her smile serene, and simply said, "Share your gifts, Elias. Love isn't meant to be kept locked away." He woke with a start, her words echoing in his mind. Share your gifts. His gift was with wood, with his hands. Could this be another whisper, another gentle nudge from that unseen, loving presence? The following Sunday, he told Father Michael he would do it. The first class was chaotic. The boys were clumsy, easily distracted, and more interested in making noise than in learning. Elias felt a familiar wave of frustration. But then he saw a quiet boy in the corner, struggling to hold a chisel correctly, his brow furrowed in concentration. Elias went over, gently adjusted his grip, and showed him the proper angle. The boy looked up, his eyes shining with a spark of understanding, and then, with a determined set to his jaw, he tried again. This time, the chisel bit cleanly into the wood. A small smile touched the boy's lips. In that moment, Elias understood. This wasn't just about teaching woodworking. It was about patience, about encouragement, about seeing potential and nurturing it. It was about sharing not just a skill but a piece of himself. It was about love in action, just as Sarah had implied in his dream. The workshop, once a place of solitary grief, began to fill with new sounds, the clumsy tapping of hammers, the hesitant strokes of saws, the occasional burst of laughter. It was still his sanctuary, but it was no longer a tomb. It was becoming a place of life, of learning, of connection. He found a new purpose, not one that erased the old pain, but one that existed alongside it, transforming it, giving it new context. He often thought of God's protection. He had once seen it as an impenetrable shield against all harm. Now, he was beginning to understand it differently. It wasn't a shield, but a presence. A presence that walked with him through the valley of the shadow of death, that didn't prevent the fall but was there to help him rise again. A presence that worked through the kindness of others, and through the kindness he himself was learning to extend. It was in the steady hand of Father Michael, the innocent trust of Daniel, the grateful smile of Clara, the eager faces of his young students. His salvation, he realized, was not a destination to be reached, but a journey, a process of becoming. It was the slow, painstaking work of rebuilding a life, not on the ruins of the old, but with the materials of love, compassion, and a tentative, growing faith. It was about opening his heart, bit by bit, to the gentle, persistent love of a God who had never abandoned him, even when Elias had felt most alone. This God didn't just watch from afar. He was intricately woven into the fabric of human experience, offering endless chances for healing and renewal, whispering invitations to participate in his work of love. The sorrow for Sarah remained, a tender ache that would likely always be a part of him, but it no longer defined him. It was now interwoven with a quiet gratitude, a burgeoning hope, and a profound sense of being held, guided, and loved by a grace far greater than he could have ever imagined. He was learning to trust the unseen hand that shaped not only wood, but also human hearts, molding them, slowly but surely, into vessels of light and love. Years passed, each one a testament to the quiet, persistent work of grace in Elias's life. The workshop flourished, not just as a business, but as a hub of community. The woodworking classes for the youth became a village institution, with Elias, now grayer but his eyes bright with a gentle wisdom, patiently guiding generations of youngsters. Some found careers in carpentry, others simply carried with them the lessons of patience, precision, and the quiet joy of creation. All of them remembered Mr. Elias, the kind old man who taught them more than just how to shape wood. He taught them about finding beauty in imperfection and strength in perseverance. The vase Clara had given him still sat on his workbench, now surrounded by other small tokens, a crudely carved bird from a grateful student, a pressed flower from Daniel, who was now a young man with a family of his own but still visited Elias regularly. Sarah's locket remained too, a precious reminder of a love that had paved the way for so much more. He no longer looked at it with sharp pain, but with a sweet, enduring affection, a gratitude for the love that had first opened his heart, even if its loss had been the catalyst for a deeper, more arduous journey towards faith. Elias's understanding of God had deepened, matured. He no longer wrestled with the why of suffering with the same agonizing intensity. He had come to accept that some questions might not have simple answers in this life. Instead, he focused on the how to live a life of love and service in the face of life's inevitable hardships, how to be a conduit for the divine compassion he had come to experience so profoundly. He saw God's hand not in the absence of trials, but in the strength to endure them, the wisdom to learn from them, and the unwavering love that undergirded all existence. His prayers were no longer desperate pleas from a place of desolation, but quiet conversations, expressions of gratitude, and requests for guidance in his efforts to love and serve those around him. He found God not only in the hushed sanctity of the church, but in the laughter of children, the warmth of friendship, the beauty of a sunrise, and the satisfying thud of an axe splitting wood cleanly. God's presence was everywhere, an encompassing love that sustained the universe. One harsh winter, a fever swept through the village. Many fell ill and resources were scarce. Elias, though no longer young, worked tirelessly alongside Father Michael and other volunteers. He chopped firewood for those too weak to do it themselves, carried water, and sat with the sick, offering quiet comfort. He saw fear and suffering, but he also saw immense courage, selfless love, and the resilient spirit of the community. In the midst of hardship, the bonds of love and mutual support grew stronger. He recognized this as God's protection, not a magical ward against illness, but the divine spark within people that moved them to care for one another, to be his hands and feet in a suffering world. During this time, a young woman in the village, Elias, lost her husband to the fever, leaving her with 2 small children and a future that seemed bleak. Elias saw in her the same raw grief he had once known so intimately. His heart ached for her. He didn't offer empty platitudes. Instead, he started leaving bundles of firewood on her doorstep, anonymously at first. He arranged for some of his older students to help repair her leaking roof. He would share some of his bread, or a warm stew, always with a gentle word, a shared understanding in his eyes. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was simply doing what love prompted him to do, what his own journey had taught him. He was sharing the comfort he himself had received. He understood that salvation wasn't just a personal experience. It was communal, a web of grace that connected everyone. By extending compassion, he was participating in God's ongoing work of healing the world, one small act of love at a time. Elias, slowly, began to emerge from her despair. She started a small mending business, her skills with a needle providing for her children. She found strength she didn't know she possessed, and she found comfort in the quiet, unwavering support of her community, often orchestrated by the gentle old woodcarver. One spring morning, as Elias sat on the bench outside his workshop, enjoying the warmth of the sun on his face, Elias approached him. She carried a small, newly sewn quilt, its pattern intricate, its colors vibrant. "Elias," she said, her voice soft but firm, "I wanted to give you this, for everything. You showed me that even in the deepest darkness, there is light. You showed me that God's love is real, because I saw it in you. Tears welled in Elias's eyes as he accepted the quilt. It was a gift of profound beauty, a testament to her resilience and her gratitude. But more than that, it was a reflection of the love that had been planted in his own heart, a love that had taken root, grown, and now bore fruit in the lives of others. "Thank you, Elias," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It is I who should be thanking you for reminding an old man what truly matters." He lived out his remaining years in this gentle rhythm of service, creativity, and quiet contemplation. The workshop remained his haven, a place where wood was transformed, and where hearts were often mended alongside broken chairs and wobbly tables. He never claimed to have all the answers, but he had found peace, a deep, abiding peace that came from knowing he was loved by God and from sharing that love with the world around him. His humanistic salvation was not an escape from the human condition, with its joys and sorrows, its triumphs and struggles. It was an immersion in it, guided by a divine love that imbued every moment with meaning and purpose. It was the understanding that God's protection was not an absence of storms, but the presence of an anchor, an unwavering love that held fast even in the fiercest gales. It was the quiet confidence that even in endings, there were new beginnings, and that love, in its myriad forms, was the most powerful force in the universe, a force that ultimately redeemed and restored all things. Elias's legacy was not in grand monuments or famous works, but in the countless lives he had touched with his kindness, his patience, and his quiet faith. It was in the warmth of the homes heated by the firewood he'd chopped, in the sturdy furniture he'd built, in the skills he'd passed on, and in the hope he had helped to rekindle in hearts shadowed by grief. He had become a living testament to the enduring, transformative power of God's love, a love that sought out the lost, comforted the grieving, and empowered the weak. His life was a story of salvation written not in stone, but in the language of human hearts, a gentle melody of grace echoing the boundless love of the Creator. And as he looked back, he knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within his soul, that he had never truly been alone. The guiding, loving, protective presence of his God had been with him every step of the way, whispering hope into his sorrow, and turning his deepest pain into a wellspring of compassion for others. His life was a full circle, from a man lost in the darkness of his own grief to a beacon of unassuming light for his community, all under the tender, watchful gaze of a loving Father. And so, Elias's journey, which began in the depths of sorrow, blossomed into a testament of enduring faith and the quiet power of love. His life reminds us that even when the path is darkest, divine light and compassion can find their way in, guiding us toward healing, purpose, and a salvation found not in escaping hardship, but in discovering God's presence and strength within it. We see that God's protection is a steadfast companionship through life's storms, and His love is a constant, gentle call to our hearts. Here at God is With, we hope Elias's story has touched you deeply and served as a reminder that you are never truly alone. What part of his transformation, or which message of hope, resonated with you the most? We would be blessed to hear your reflections in the comments below. If this story has inspired you, please support our mission to share messages of faith and encouragement by giving this video a thumbs up, sharing it with someone who might need this message today, and subscribing to God is With for more content that affirms the loving, guiding presence of God in our lives. Thank you for joining us. May you carry the warmth and hope of Elias's story with you, and always remember, especially in your own moments of need or questioning, that God is with you. Peace be with you.